What we're going to do now is I'm going to show you, since I'm going to create the new component, the howdy time, the howdy time component, I'm going to show you how to include your external packages inside of your Angular library. Okay, so let's create the next component, which is going to be howdy time component. And that component is going to be using the Moment.js package. And I'm going to show you now how to include Moment.js into your UI library and how to have it packaged in your library distributable. So let's start first by doing an npm install of Moment into our UI library web project. Into the Power Video Magic, we're gonna skip this load. Okay, so now we have installed a Moment.js into our web application here, where we're building out our Split Howdy UI library. This is going to allow us to be able to use Moment.js during our development of the various different components that we're creating here. But that's just for our own development of this web app. If we want to include Moment.js in our UI library as a dependency, we have to go into our library itself, and then that library is going to contain its own package JSON file, which is right here, right? So there's a difference between the package JSON file defined for your web project, for your web application, and a package JSON that's defined for your UI library project that gets bundled and shared with other projects. So what we need to do here is we need to add another property called dependencies. Oops, dependencies. I can't spell dependencies. And then in here, what we do is just include the same version of Moment that we're using right now. Boom. We're going to include Moment.js, or that version of Moment. Okay, cool. In addition, we need to tell our ng packager config file here that we're going to mark Moment as we're going to whitelist it as a peer dependency. So let me get that property. Whitelisted non-peer dependencies, a list of dependencies that are allowed in the dependencies and the dependencies section of this library JSON. That's what we want. So no, not tslib. What we're going to add is Moment. And so what this is going to do, the reason we don't add a version number is because this is a regular expression. This whitelist, when ng packager tries to find this peer dependency, whitelisted peer dependency, it's just going to use it as a regular expression, and we're just looking for Moment. Okay. All right. So that is it. So then what we need to do is we actually create the component itself. So we've added we've added Moment, and we included it now. We've told ng packager that we want Moment to be included in our bundled UI library. So these are all the changes. Include Moment in library bundle. All right. So now what we want to do is create the actual component that's going to be using Moment.js, and that's howdy time. So as we did before with howdy name component, we generate the module, generate module inside of a folder called time, and we're going to call it howdy time. All right, and then Okay, and then we generate our component tied to that module. Okay, so now that we've created our component inside of the lib folder, there it is, time. Here's our component, our module, and our component, right? Come on. All right, so anyway, we need to be here. We're just gonna replace all this code with our code. So we are importing moment as moment, and then creating a property here, a string property, and we're assigning to that property the date format, today's date, in this date format using moment. So just like before, we don't need the CSS and we don't need the HTML, so we're gonna delete that. And the other thing, we need to make sure that our howdy time module is exporting each one of our components, right? Because they're going to be used, they're going to be used outside. So here this module needs to howdy time component, right? And how, yeah, sorry, that was howdy time component, and this is exports howdy name component. Sorry, not the the component. Good. Okay. All right. So the next question that you're probably having in your mind: should we include bundle out external packages and other libraries in our own custom UI library? The answer to that is it depends. I personally highly recommend against it, mainly because you are adding additional dependencies on external libraries that may change often. Like there may be Moment.js is a big library. So that library itself, you would definitely not want to include it inside of your UI library bundle. You might want to require it as a peer dependency, meaning that whoever is going to be using your UI library needs to have it installed as a dependency for that web project. And you just mark it in your documentation and you state, hey, this is going to be a peer dependency. Bootstrap is another one of those examples where you don't want to bundle it into your UI library. But then, and if you do need like a date functionality library, make sure that it's something smaller than Moment.js. I know Moment.js has a smaller version of that package, and I also know that there's another library called Date Functions, Date FNS. It's an NPM. Look it up. You can include that one. That's a lot lighter. And but if I were to give a blanket recommendation, it would be no. Don't include external third-party packages, because it's just going to add more complexity to your project. You're also going to have to maintain and keep your project's packages up to date as often as possible. Some of these, Moment.js is a mature package, so it may not have as frequent updates, but there's still updates that happen to it. There may be other more greener and more not as mature packages that you may end up using that will change constantly, and some of those changes could be breaking changes, and now you have to go back and fix your UI library because there was a breaking change that took place with this third-party library that you have been using before. My recommendation: don't do this, but if you have to, make sure that that dependency is small, tiny, and you absolutely need it, and that hopefully it's not going to change that much, and if it does, you need to maintain it. Always keep it up to date, always keep your dependencies up to date, and release as many patch versions of your UI library so that other consumers of your library are up to date as well.